Hello and welcome into the Lockdown Wolves postcast following the Timberwolves win over the Memphis Grizzlies. Jack Borman and I break down the whole thing next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Lockdown Wolves postcast. Of course, the Lockdown Wolves postcast is part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of the Lockdown Wolves show. I'm in for Luke Inman today and here with the fantastic Jack Borman, who's always on the postcast with us here at Lockdown Wolves. Off the top, real quick, before we get into Wolves Grizzlies, today's episode is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right. This was a fantastic, fun game. There's all kinds of superlatives we could give this game here off the top. Setting it up really quickly, the Timberwolves come in off the catastrophic collapse against Milwaukee on Tuesday. There's a lot of words we could use for that one too. Had a 5-game winning streak snapped when they were up 24 early in the fourth. They collapse, they lose. And it goes without saying that this is a massive game, a game behind Memphis in the standings coming in. There were, I think, 5 teams within a game of each other in the Western Conference. Any given day this week, there's been 4 teams with an identical record. And a huge game for Minnesota as they close out what's been a 6-game road trip, 5 or 6 game road trip. For Memphis, no Jalen Wells, who is the primary defender against Anthony Edwards in the first 2 matchups that were both won by the Grizzlies back in January. And, of course, no Brandon Clark, who's out for the season for Memphis, which is a huge deal. And the Wolves without, I'm not going to say it's only because Jalen Wells wasn't on the floor, but Ant went crazy in this game. We'll talk about his 44 piece in this game. And Julius Randle played one of his best games of the season. Just an absolute must win for Minnesota. And they were down by 5 at halftime. And then they turn in a franchise record and season best quarter in the NBA with 52 points in the third. And they end up holding on late to win this thing by, I think, 16 points. So, I don't know where you want to take it from here, Jack. We could talk about the scoring explosion. We could talk about Ant. But there's plenty to get into with this one.
Sorry, I was just getting out of the way of all those John Morant grenades that he was throwing around FedEx for him tonight.
A lot of grenades early in this game.
A lot of grenades were flying around. But I'll tell you what, the Timberwolves cooked a few themselves. It was just really fun to watch. I know that I was out of commission the other night with a little bit of an illness, and it sounds like the Timberwolves are pretty sick of that performance that they had the other night as well. I just loved that in this game, the Timberwolves from the jump looked like the hungrier team. They looked like the more connected team, and I just really appreciated the way that they weren't really rattled by the way that Memphis just absolutely exploded in that first half. In that first half, Memphis, what they shoot from three? They shot 13 of 19 from three. That's their most, or their best 3-point shooting half of the season, in which they've taken at least like 16 threes. 68% from three. They averaged 14 a game. They made 13 in the first half, and Desmond Bane was 6 of 6 in that first half. And the Timberwolves off-ball defense on the perimeter in the first half was awful. I think again, the Timberwolves very easily could have just started pointing fingers at guys that were having lapses defensively and weren't quite as locked in as they needed to be, losing shooters off the ball. But instead, they just totally came together. They didn't rely on the bench guys to come in and really make an instant impact. The starters just kind of put it on themselves and said, hey, we got to band together and we got to set a tone coming out of the second half. And play the brand of basketball that we want to play. And they totally imposed their will on the Grizzlies in Memphis, which is a super, hostile, fun place to play. And I think the Timberwolves deserve a lot of credit. They played like a team, certainly, that controlled their own destiny. And that's the case for the Wolves. If they win out, they're guaranteed to be at least or at worst the 6th seed, which is certainly plausible considering who their final 2 opponents are. Which we'll get into a little bit later. But really strong performance from the Timberwolves and have to be happy with almost everything that you saw on the court tonight.
Yeah, you brought up a great point. Memphis was for as hot as Minnesota was, the Grizzlies scored 125 points in this game too. This wasn't a double overtime game, right? To have 266 total points. And, the Wolves were a bit lackadaisical defense. I mean, you talked about this early in the game. Memphis was hot. Like Memphis had more made threes than the Wolves. They were shooting a higher percentage from three than the Wolves in the first half of this game. And Memphis had a 41-point second quarter, which in any other game would be just easily the highest scoring quarter by any team. And then the Wolves bested it with the 52 in the third. So I think the Wolves' response, and then also like this, we shouldn't have to pat the Wolves on the back for holding on to a 20-point lead in the fourth, but there was a moment where there was a little bit of panic. There was a bad Randle turnover, then a bad Ant turnover, got down to 10 points. And then the Wolves still kind of were able to, I can't remember what the next possession was, but they had a good possession mixed in there. And then it was like they got back on track. They got fouled, got to the free throw line. Like some of the stuff they weren't doing against Milwaukee on Tuesday, they showed more composure both in the first half, overcoming when Memphis scored 1 billion points and couldn't miss from outside the arc. And then in the fourth quarter, when it went from 20 plus to 10 points and it started to be a little bit dicey, I thought both were really good responses from Minnesota. We can talk a little bit about the stars for the Wolves. I mean, Anthony Edwards, he couldn't miss early in this game. I think he made his first 3 or 4 3-pointers and was also getting to the line. Like it was a nice mix of there was some mid-range in there. Like he was just making everything. And then he exploded completely in the third quarter. I think he had 20 plus at halftime. I don't even think he scored in the fourth quarter. I think it was all first, maybe one bucket. I think it was like 20 something at halftime. Then he had 18 points in the third quarter. But Anthony Edwards was fantastic. Julius Randle, after really playing poorly on Tuesday in Milwaukee, was awesome. 31, 10, and 5 for Julius Randle and 5 made threes. He came out of the gate firing in the first quarter and knocked down a couple of threes early, a couple of tough twos. And there were some moments middle of the game where there were a little too much Julius Randle ISOs, but then first quarter, third quarter, I thought Julius Randle was awesome and played a really important role alongside Anthony Edwards as those guys combined for 75 of the Timberwolves' 141, more than half of their points in this game.
Yeah, it was the highest scoring output that those two guys put together in any game this season, 75. Their previous best was 70 in that game where Ant went for 53 against the Pistons. And an important note, the Wolves, when Julius Randle and Ant combined for at least 59 points, they're now 9-1 in those 10 games. And then when those two guys combine for at least 50, they are now 19-6, which is a 62 win pace. So when both of those guys have it firing, they're really tough to beat. The only problem for the Timberwolves is it probably just hasn't happened quite as much as they would hope to. And certainly Randle missed, 15 games there over that stretch in the middle of the season. But even then, I still think that you'd like them to be playing off one another a little bit better than they have for the majority of the season. And you can get into the spacing, some of the spacing issues and how it may not be the most ideal lineup around them, yada, yada. But in this game, I think that tonight totally underscored the differences between Julius Randle and Karl Anthony Towns and why what Julius Randle brings to the table at times can be significantly more valuable than what Karl Anthony Towns brings to the table offensively. And I think, obviously what you lose with Karl, you lose, an elite floor spacer, shooting big, who's really, really good on both backboards. But with Randle, what I think might honestly be more important to unlocking a higher level and a higher ceiling for this team is that, he's way better than Karl is at getting a self-created bucket, staying under control in the drive, and drawing the defense in and then making smart passes that take advantage of the defense committing too many guys to him in the middle of the paint, and you saw that on full display tonight, which was really important to see. I thought you saw Julius Randle come out right away at the start of this game, had 3 scores and had a couple more assists as well. I think he scored or assist on like 11 of the first 14 points. And I just think he's done that quite a few times this year. And it allows Ant to kind of get into the flow of the game a little bit and see how the defense is playing him. And Ant has said too, sometimes it takes me a little bit to understand, all right, are they going to, hedge? Are they going to send 2 right away? Are they going to ice me? Are they going to blitz me? Are they going to, play straight up? Are they going to switch everything? So he sometimes likes to feel it out, and then he'll just kind of take off and go. And that's kind of what we saw in this game. And I think the way that you can kind of go back and forth between the two, and both guys are able to wear on the interior of the defense is something that's really fun to watch, because I think, especially with Ant being as good of a 3-point shooter as he is, and Julius being able to have nights like, he did tonight, shooting 5 of 10 from 3, is super important, because, they can space for each other. And when both guys are able to knock down threes the way that they were tonight, they're just going to be really, really tough to stop. So really, really fun to watch those guys. And I think too, the other part of it for Randle is, I just think it allows Ant to stay fresh a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. I think Ant, kind of think of it like a backfield, in the sense, you've got, your running back one who's maybe a little bit more of an explosive guy, who certainly can, get up and down the field and, pick up 8-9 yards of carry. But then you bring in, number 2 running back that can still get you 4, 5, 6 yards of carry, but can give that guy a break and allow him to be the most effective guy that he can be. And I think you kind of saw that with Randle tonight, that it allowed Ant to stay fresh for the entirety of him, kind of going off, especially early when Ant was guarding Ja Morant. So just really fun, symbiotic, positive game from those two.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple possessions where Ant literally was like, you could see he was like, I'm going to go stand over here. Like, let's let Julius Randle go to work on the other side of the floor. And I mean, like, there's also the possession, and I'm not saying that like Cat wouldn't have gotten off a jumper at the end of the shot clock, but that left corner 3, which I think was the only 3 the Wolves missed in the third quarter at the end of the shot clock, Randle just got it up off the rim, and Ant dove in and got the tip slam, and it was a big play. Momentum, continued the momentum rolling downhill for the Wolves. So, there's certainly those elements of Randle's game that you detailed that are really complementary when it's gone about in the right way. Next, I want to get into a bit of a deeper dive in some of the areas that the Wolves played really well in this game. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of the Locked On Wolves Postcast is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here. The play-in starts on Tuesday, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting extremely easy. Maybe you just want to pick your favorite team. You just want to pick the Wolves. You want to dive into player props. Any Anthony Edwards over tonight would have been great, I'm sure. Threes made, points, whatever you wanted to go with, probably turnovers if that's on there. He had some turnovers in this game too. From 3-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, taking a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the numbers from this game and some of the categories in which the Wolves needed to win, or they just needed to stay close because the Grizzlies are good at these categories, right? Like, we know Memphis plays really fast. The Wolves didn't want to get sucked into playing at Memphis's speed, which happened earlier this year when they played against the Grizzlies. Happened a little bit in this game, but as we're going to talk about, they did a pretty good job of not allowing that to take over the game. That's one example. Historically, Memphis is, they do really well in the paint. They're a good offensive rebounding team. Other categories, the Wolves had to kind of, at least hold their own in. What are some of the key areas that stand out to you, Jack, in this one that the Wolves either won or kept close enough to come out with the win in this one?
Yeah, for sure. I think number one for me is free throw attempts, right? Memphis allows the second most free throw attempts in the league at about 25 a game, and the Wolves 25 of 28 tonight. Anthony Edwards by himself went 8 of 13, which is certainly something that you want to see. And for the Wolves to get 28 free throws without Julius Randle taking a single one is pretty impressive. And I think just kind of speaks to the way that the ball was moving, and it was allowing, a bunch of different guys to get into the paint, which was great. And playing in the paint, that was an area too that they needed to keep close for tonight, because Memphis has been one of the best paint scoring teams in the league for not just this season, but kind of the entirety that they've had. This triumvirate of Morant, Bane, and Jaren Jackson, and Memphis second in the league this year in points in the paint, scored offensively at about 56. They had 54, so just below that tonight. But the Wolves right there at 48, and they were down. They only had 16 in the first half, and they had 10 in the first 3.5 minutes of the third quarter, really kind of imposed their will in there early in that third. And they did the same thing on the fast break, which was super important as well. I think that they kind of gave Memphis a little bit of their own medicine. They tied this area 15-15, and that's certainly an area that you would expect Memphis to be. Really, I mean, Wolves fans have seen it a bunch of times over the years where Memphis has just kind of killed them there. And then the other two for me were points off of turnovers. The Wolves had really, really struggled recently. Their average points off turnover differential the last 5 was -8, which let's see here. It was -7, which is 28, so third worst in the league the last 5 games. And then Memphis again is a team that we've seen can really turn it up. Points off turnovers are 10th in the league scoring this season. So great to keep it close there. And then bench scoring too, another area Memphis has really, really struggled. Obviously they haven't necessarily been dealt the best hand in terms of injuries this season, but they're bottom 10 in the league, last 10 in scoring off the bench. And the Wolves took advantage of that tonight, despite their bench guys not necessarily playing their best as a unit. But yeah, I think those 5 areas were kind of what I was targeting coming into this game, and nice to see that they won 3 of them pretty handily, and then tied another one, and then lost one they probably expected to get blown out a little bit by just 6. So really good night from the Wolves, and I think going back to that third quarter was nice that they were able to kind of just do a little bit of everything in that third quarter. I didn't touch on it quite enough right away, but the Wolves started 10 of 10 from the floor in the third quarter as part of that 24-2 run. I like this version of a 24-2 run a lot better than the 24-2 run or whatever it was that took place the other night. But the Wolves were 18 of 21 shooting in the third quarter, 86%. They were 11 of 13 from 2, 7 of 8 from 3, 9 of 10 from the free throw line. And their stars in the third quarter, Ant, Julius, Rudy, combined for 41 of the 52 points on 14 of 16 shooting. It was just incredible to see the way that all those guys were working together perfectly in that third quarter. And I think, kind of gives you a good snapshot of just how well they were playing.
Yeah, I mean the third quarter was unbelievable. I think on the broadcast, I was watching the TNT broadcast, and I think that they said that Memphis didn't get their first rebound, period, not just offensive rebound. They didn't get their first rebound until there's 4.5 minutes left in the quarter, which is just insane. It was definitely the second half of the third quarter before they even got a rebound in the frame, and they did only have one offensive rebound in the first 2.5 quarters of this game. So some of those stats along the way were crazy. In some ways, the third quarter felt a little bit like the fourth quarter, the flip side of the fourth quarter on Tuesday. I mean, it was like Memphis could do nothing, and then the Wolves just kind of had to hang on there at the end. I mean, you talked a little bit about turnovers, and that was the thing that worried me the most coming into this game. I mean, Memphis is, you talked about this Minnesota struggles. They've had struggles all year, but again, here recently, it's kind of cropped up again as a major issue for the Wolves. And they and Memphis forces turnovers. Memphis is top half of the league in terms of opponent turnover rate, and they're a solid defense. I mean, they've kind of hovered around the 10th best defense for a while. And that was a concern coming into this game. And yeah, the Wolves did turn it over 16, 17 times, something like that. But overall, like you talked about, fast break points, the Wolves did enough to win that category, which was really positive to see. Real quickly, related to I want to talk a little bit about Rudy Gobert. So Gobert had been awesome for the last, 3 weeks. I did a show the other day on, is this the best stretch he's had in a Wolves uniform? I think you could certainly argue that numbers wise it is. And yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for sure. And then he wasn't super active in the Milwaukee game, not entirely his fault. I thought he was just okay defensively, and he just wasn't super available on offense. He was really good in this game. He was quiet. I think he had 1 bucket in the whole first half, but he finished with 13 points on a perfect 5 of 5, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Was I thought really good. And we talked about the Wolves lost points in the paint, but it was close. What'd you make of Rudy's game? Kind of, I guess, in light of and in the context of what he's been doing the last few weeks.
Yeah, what I think has been really important, and this is something too that they unlocked a little bit when he was down with that back issue, was that they started using other guys as the screener for Ant, whereas primarily early in the season, Rudy was setting like all his screens for Ant, and it was a lot of just Rudy setting that high screen and dive into the rim. And I think they've used him a lot more in the dunker spot, having Randle screen or even small to small screens for Ant, which has really helped because I think Ant's much better at getting into the paint, drawing a second or a third guy, and then leaving that dump off pass to Rudy in the dunker, as opposed to always trying to find him on the roll, which has been important. So I think, that's been really important. But then too, I just think when the Wolves ball movement is better as a whole, you just get more broken floor situations where it's harder to account for a guy in the dunker spot than it is for, say a 3-point shooter that's wide open in the corner or something like that. And I think the Wolves have just played, really unselfish basketball for the majority of the last, 2 or 3 weeks that the ball has just kind of ended up finding Rudy. But you also have to give him credit too for what he's done in the offensive glass. He didn't have an offensive rebound tonight, but he's been scoring like 6, 7, 8 second chance points per game the last couple of weeks too, which is, just Rudy being Rudy and making his own offense. So I think the Wolves have done a better job of finding him. He's been better in the dunker, and that's really been helpful for both Ant and Julius finding him. And I think the Wolves coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for the way that they've gotten a little bit more creative with using Rudy and not just having him be that guy that's setting screens atop the floor, whether that's in horns, double drag, standard high ball screen, those types of things.
Yeah, and he had 4 assists in this game, and I think 2 of them came early in the fourth quarter when things were kind of teetering a little. I say that in what was always a double-digit game, but it still felt a bit scary. And like one coming out of a timeout that pushed the lead back to like 12 or 15 or 14 or 15 or something. Jaden McDaniels hit the corner 3. That was Rudy on the short roll, and I think that was the second time that we saw that early in the fourth quarter in this game where. That's a pass he's always been able to make. And, it's our guys available is the pass being made to Rudy, but he usually makes the right decision and makes a pretty good pass. Something he did very well in Utah too. And he did that in big moments in this game too. All right, let's close by talking about the Wolves Nets matchup. We get to see the Nets again tomorrow night. And we'll talk a little bit about the Western Conference playoff picture currently and where the Wolves sit, what could happen. The good news about, if the Wolves win out, they're likely to, or they will get out of the play-in. They could even still get as high as 4th. So we'll talk about that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves Postcast is sponsored by our friends at Betterhelp. The show is sponsored by Betterhelp. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health, but traditional in-person therapy can be expensive, often ranging from $100 to $250 per session. That's where BetterHelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you time and money. Therapy isn't just for life's toughest moments. It can help with everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries, or developing positive coping skills. Having access to support when you need it can make a big difference. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so I guess we could talk Western Conference first and just kind of how things stand. I'm trying to just refresh. I guess nothing really else affecting the standings has happened tonight, and the Wolves were the last game. So the Wolves are currently following the game. They're back into a 3-way tie in the Western Conference, 6th, 7th, and 8th, Golden State, Memphis, and Minnesota. The Wolves lose the 3-way tiebreaker because of the way it works is the combined record of the 3 teams against each other. They also would lose the head-to-head against both Memphis and Golden State. But both Golden State and Memphis have tough schedules coming up. We'll talk about that, at least compared to the Wolves, at least in theory. Obvious caveats apply, but like on paper, the Wolves are in a pretty good spot when it comes to that. And of course, if they get above Golden State and Memphis, they win the head-to-head tiebreaker against both Denver and the Clippers, who are only 1 game ahead of that trio. So you've got still 5 teams within a game of each other. The Wolves lose most combined tiebreakers. They win head-to-head tiebreakers against the Nuggets and Clippers, and they lose them against the Warriors and Grizzlies. A lot to look for here in the next few days. It's going to be a lot of fun scoreboard watching over the weekend.
Yeah, it certainly will. I think that, it's going to be interesting to see really what happens with the Warriors and Clippers. I think, I'm not super concerned about the Timberwolves losing either of these 2 games. I think they're 18-point favorites for tomorrow against Brooklyn. It's the second night of a back-to-back for Brooklyn, who played in New York tonight. against the Hawks. They lost by like 25. And then the Jazz have incentive to keep losing to ensure that they can finish at worst the 4th pick in the draft this coming year. And I think the Nets might be locked in to their spot, but in any case, they didn't play D'Lo, Day'Ron Sharpe, Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas tonight. So I think a couple of those guys are out for the year, but so there's not a whole lot to glean from in that game. I think the guys are playing for roster spots next year and things of that nature. So they're going to play hard for sure, but huge talent disparity, no question. And I think just in terms of the standings, in terms of what the Timberwolves fans should be rooting for, so the Timberwolves can still get the 4 spot. And honestly, I think that there's a pretty good chance. I think that the chance of the Timberwolves getting the 4 spot is greater than the chance of them finishing in either the 5 or the 6 spot. So what needs to happen for the Timberwolves to be the 4 seed? They need to win out. So win Friday against Brooklyn, Sunday against Utah. And then Golden State needs to win out. So Golden State plays Friday tomorrow in Portland. And then they play Sunday in San Francisco against the Clippers. And then the Clippers would need to win tomorrow against Sacramento, which should happen. Sacramento is, still has something to play for. They're kind of still in the race for that 9 spot between them and Dallas. So they'll be playing hard. And then like I already said, if Golden State beats the Clippers on Sunday, Timberwolves are the 4 seed. So that'll be kind of interesting to monitor, how that ends up shaking out. In that scenario, I think, don't quote me, but I think Golden State would be the 5 seed. But because I think the Clippers are 0-3 against the Warriors this season.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So
I mapped it out the other day. That sounds right. We got a question from Jeff in the comments about there's this kind of thought that's out there. Do you want to avoid, various podcasts have talked about this, like, do you want to avoid the 4-5 because then if you win, you play OKC in the second round? And in theory, yes, like in theory, you want to wait as long as you can to play the best team in case somebody else knocks them out. But obviously you can't get too cute. You just got to win games and see what happens. And I think both, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jack, but I think we both think the Wolves actually match up with the Thunder pretty well. And like, you're probably going to have to go through them anyway. So I don't know that, like, I think you'd rather still, and I know the Wolves haven't been dominant at home this year, but you'd still rather have home court than not have home court. So if you can get to 4, you get to 4 and you figure it out later that you still got to win a tough 4-5 matchup. You have home court. You then face OKC very likely in the second round. And of course the Wolves played the Thunder hard. They split 4 games with them this year. I think overall the Wolves' size will give the Thunder trouble if that's where we end up. If the Timberwolves end up, in the other side of the bracket, great. They may or may not see the Thunder in the conference finals. But among all the teams in the West, I actually think the Wolves might be the worst matchup for OKC. Not saying the Wolves are better than OKC. I want to be really clear about that. But if you're the Thunder, the team you may least want to face might be Minnesota. And, I don't know that I feel strongly about like the Lakers matchup. I think I'd feel okay about the Wolves in that matchup too. But yeah, I don't know. The OKC one, like, you're probably if you're going to get to the finals, you probably got to go through them anyway. So like, you might as well try and get the 4 seed.
Yeah, I want no part of Luka Doncic and LeBron James.
Right. Yeah.
Those are 2 of the probably 5 smartest offensive basketball players who have ever played. And when you put them in a playoff setting where they get to sit down and manipulate matchups however they want and just pick you apart, I just don't want any part of that. No matter how bad the Lakers bench has been or how thin you think their interior is, like, I just don't want any part of that. I would much prefer, home court advantage, obviously, against the Clippers. I mean, the Wolves have played the Clippers, 3 times, and one time Kawhi didn't play and Norman Powell didn't play. I think 2 of the 3 times that was what happened, and the Wolves played the Clippers at full strength once, and they beat them. So, but again, the Clippers, when they've got Norm Powell, Kawhi, James Harden, and Ivica Zubac, have been the 3rd best team in the West by net rating when those guys all play. So it's nothing to sneeze at anyways. But, being able to be the 4 seed, then, I'd be able to go get on a plane, go see Intuit Dome, which would be awesome. And then, maybe see if there's a guest room at the Beecken household for the Western Conference semis would be definitely a fun one. But No, I think I'm just not quite as convinced of Oklahoma City solely because I don't think they have anyone that they can bank on as a number 2 guy behind Shea.
Yep.
And if Shea has a night where he scores, 25, 26 points on like 10 of 25 shooting, I know the Thunder's defense is awesome. I have zero questions about the Thunder's defense whatsoever. But, I just worry that, on nights when Shea may not have it, which you'd think would happen more in the playoffs, just with the fouls being a little bit more, backyard basketball rules instead of, touch fouls. It's a big spot for Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, and I'm willing to be proven wrong for sure, but I just haven't seen enough of it yet.
Yeah, I mean, like you look at what happened to the Mavs in the finals last year. I think they only won 1 game, if I remember right, and like they didn't have a reliable second option behind Luka. Obviously, they got to the finals, and to some extent, look at how dominant the Wolves' defense was last year. The Thunder's defense has been even more dominant this year, in a little bit of a different way, a lot of a different way. But and look what happened to the Wolves eventually in the playoffs. So the Thunder are undoubtedly they're the best team in the West. They should be the favorites to come out of the West, and I want to be really clear about that. But the playoffs are different. And, I think it's more about who has the best chance to beat OKC more than anything else. So we'll probably unpack, hopefully Friday night's game is a little bit of a laugher. We'll be back with the postcast tomorrow night, and then we could talk a little bit more about these different scenarios. Hopefully. I don't know. Is anything else to say about Brooklyn? We talked about all the injuries. We talked about the back-to-back. The Wolves are massive favorites. They're, of course, nothing is a given ever, but especially with this Wolves team. But I mean, I don't know that there's much else about tomorrow night to talk about.
Yeah, Jordi Fernandez, let's just stay up near mid-court, half court. All right. Let's not walk behind shooters when they're taking shots. Just stay out of the way, collect your paycheck, and let's just get to the end of the regular season.
Good advice. Good advice. He can be one of the keys to the game is Jordi Fernandez stayed in the coach's box for the game. All right. That's all we got for you tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll be hosting again with Jack, following Wolves Nets on Friday night. Of course, we go live after every single Wolves game over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Thank you for watching this live. If you're catching the audio afterwards, you know where to find it. But if you haven't before, you can find it at Locked On Wolves on the audio feed. I'll be back tomorrow with the daily Locked On Wolves podcast on Friday. You can always catch the postcast live or not live, but you can catch the recording of the live postcast later after the fact on the audio feed at Locked On Wolves. So please be sure to do that if you can't catch us live tomorrow night. Otherwise, that's all we got for you. Big thank you for watching. A big thank you for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow night.